How's it going, guys? Today I wanted to showcase the fastest week 1 mapper that you can make on nearly zero budget. This is the Corrupting Fever Poet's Pen Gladiator. This maintains being a top tier map farmer throughout the league with investment, but it gets outscaled by other builds later in the league. Important caveats to know is that this is purely a mapping build. The investment required to do higher bosses on it is higher than is worth investing for the most part. Outside of getting your first kills on Eater of Worlds and the Searing Exarch, which will still be hard fights, you would have a serious struggle with anything further. So, as you can see here with the build, the path of building is not really going to be showcasing everything. You'll see here the damage itself is only showing 1.4 million, but the majority of the clear that you're going to be getting in maps is going to be coming from bleed explosions from gratuitous violence. And the majority of the movement speed you're going to be getting is going to be through Arena Challenger. The tree itself that I have prepared here today does not require any cluster jewels, and the only required unique within the build is Poet's Pen. Poet's Pen has a tendency to be a little expensive sometimes on the first couple days, but the build itself functions on a Spellslinger setup as well. So you'll see here in the POB, I have included a day 1 setup with just a simple +1 wand. I didn't even put attack speed or anything on this at all. And with Duresso's Courage isn't required. You can always just use either a second +1 wand or a +1 shield. I'm going to recommend that you purchase a Duresso's Courage on day 1 and a Mark of Submission, as these are typically 1C uniques that you can pick up on day 1 until you are able to either craft yourself a better shield. In my case, I try to invest as little as possible in my league start if I'm going on a mapper, and I just want to farm up as much currency as I possibly can before investing it into another build that I'm going to play. So for me, a lot of the times I will just end up using the Mark of Submission and Duresso's Courage for the entirety of the character before I swap to something new. The Mark of Submission will eventually get replaced with a Curse on Hit ring. We all know they're not very difficult to craft. You can either just use the fossils that give a guaranteed caster mod on a Warlord's ring. This will require a level 80 Warlord's ring at this point now. The build itself is typically a little socket starved, so my recommendation is to get on an unset ring if possible, but you do typically only end up needing one unset ring in the build, so you can have that be the ring that you end up having resistances on, and just use a normal ring, whatever you can get for a Warlord's ring for the second one. For your amulet, you're just typically going for a +1 Phys Skills amulet, and for your chest, you're going to want to be getting any armor with +2 duration gems, with Tainted Fusings being adjusted back to the rates that they were in Scourge League. It should be very easy this league in order to get some nice +2 chest pieces. Worst case scenario, you just end up using a simple +2 tabula until you're able to get something better, or a Skin of the Lords. Either one, they all work. Outside of that, you're typically just going to be looking for resistances, and for your belt, I would typically recommend Biscos, just because Rampage itself is going to add a significant movement speed and attack speed for you, which will increase your map clear. For the tree itself, for leveling, you're going to want to use two-handed steel skills. You will not want to end up changing over to using a Spellslinger setup until you have made it through at least normal lab in order to pick up the challenger charges. You'll want to pick up the challenger charges here first, because these are going to give you the biggest increase to your movement speed and attack speed, which means your late slams are going faster, and or your shield charges are going faster, and it's going to allow you to progress through the story quicker. While you're going along the tree, you're pretty much just grabbing physical nodes along the way. The physical mastery for two-handed here is a very big DPS increase early, so you typically end up rushing over to Resolute Technique, and you're grabbing the physical nodes, and then by the time you are finishing normal lab around 35, then this is where you can make that swap to Spellslinger as long as you have the 4 links required to do it. For the Spellslinger setup, everything requires only a 4 link. If you end up getting anything higher, it is just going to be some quality of life, but the POB itself is actually just using a 4 link setup here. So you can see here that I have a 4 link Exsanguinate, which is Controlled Destruction and Brutality. This can be Cruelty as well. I do not know if this actually, Cruelty and Controlled Destruction have roughly the same DPS, so it doesn't really matter here. And then you can see that with the auras, everything is just a 4 link, and same with the Corrupting Fever is just going to be a 4 link with Life Tap, Brutality, Efficacy. You don't have Empower. Empower would be better for it, but you're not going to end up having an Empower, of course, early on. So you'll end up using a 4 link Corrupting Fever pretty much throughout the time that you have it. Increasing your Corrupting Fever to 21 as soon as you can. Highly recommended. You can typically get one with 0 quality for very inexpensive. It's typically only maybe 10C or so. Fairly early, depending on if level 21s are dropping from League mechanics or certain things like that. You do have a couple options when it comes to the tree that you are going to end up using. We have the option for more damage, which is using Outmatch Outlast, or if you want more consistent permanent block chance, then you can use Painforged, which will give you a much higher block chance on your attacks, which as soon as you block an attack, it triggers the 75 block chance on spells, and vice versa. Typically in mapping, there's going to be more things attacking you than there are going to be things doing spells on you. So having a higher block chance for attacks allows you to max out that spell block even faster. And sometimes there aren't really any mobs in an entire pack that are casting spells. So this is why I still typically invest a few points into normal block itself, and then just leave Duressos up to handle the rest of the spell block. For those that are looking to use a cluster jewel setup, you would typically just use a physical cluster jewel with Ironbreaker, Battle Harden, and Force Multiplier, and then you end up using Student of Decay and Flow of Life on the medium cluster jewels. For those that are looking to just make this build with as little budget as possible, you end up pathing through Spiritual Aid and Righteous Army. You end up grabbing the minion nodes over on the right-hand tree as well, and everything from there is just physical dot, aura effect, mana reservation, and block chance and physical damage itself. Some good information out for the build is that this build is typically best suited around tier 14 maps. As you push to tier 16, the bosses start to have a bit more life, so you end up having to spend a significant amount of time killing the bosses. A lot of the times you spend more time killing the boss than you do killing everything else in the entire map altogether. So being at tier 14s is a pretty good place to sit with the build. So I've went ahead and recorded some mapping footage here with the build. The best types of maps that you want to be farming for this build are going to be builds with open layouts. Something like dunes or a canyon, things like that are going to be best suited, and the league mechanics that you will typically be best suited at farming with this build are going to be things like Legion, Harbinger, Strongboxes, and Essences. If you are looking to take the build to the next level and invest in it further, after you get your Poet's Pen set up, with a +2 chest, then the next step is going to be to get an inspired learning. And then pretty much from there, you don't really have to touch anything else investment-wise in the build, and you can use it to farm at the highest efficiency. You'll notice this is not too dissimilar from the Spellslinger setups that Grimro typically uses to push to get to an unlimited budget to run whatever build he ends up running for the league. For me personally, I always prefer to use the Poet's Pen setup with a wand. For me, I find it just a bit more defensive if I need it to be, because again, I'm getting to use a shield. I get to have the max block instead of having to focus on any spell suppression or anything like that, and the budget itself is going to be much lower versus having to purchase the physical cluster jewels, which, if it's a league where Seismic Trap is popular, which it seems like it's going to be because it's still the only build that avoided nerfs for the most part, then you end up having to pay a significant price for the cluster jewels early on because you're competing with all the Seismic players. So I'm going to go ahead and post a path of building below, and I will include some mapping footage of the build to showcase it a bit. If you have any questions about it, leave a comment below and I'll be more than happy to answer them. And other than that, see you in the next one.